Lexus RX gets smarter and more focused in this 5th generation guise. For the first time in several generations, it's been fundamentally redesigned, and the result is a contender offering both full hybrid and PHEV power, and one that could have conquest appeal in the luxury SUV segment for larger models.
The RX is an important car for the Lexus brand to get right. In this 5th generation form, it claims to have been completely reinvented. But the concept this model line established back at the turn of the century for what a large luxury SUV should be is very much familiar. Lexus reckons the original RX model of 1998 founded the market segment for luxury-focused SUVs, a softer, more road-orientated thing than the only two other contenders for that title available back then, the Range Rover and the Mercedes M-Class. And, as it turned out, more reflective of the sort of large, plush crossover that well-heeled folk would want in the following 2 decades. RX design has continuously evolved since, particularly beneath the bonnet. It was the segment's first model to offer an electrified engine with the self-charging hybrid RX 400h of 2005. Technology rivals chose to ignore in this sector, more recently introducing plug-in hybrid models instead. In fact, the RX range as a whole has been somewhat ignored in recent times, in Europe at least, which has accounted for only 300,000 of the 3.5 million sales generated by this model line in its lifetime, with only 58,000 of those in the UK. Most RXs are sold in the US, and even if you didn't know that, you could probably have guessed it by the plush, slushy transatlantic vibe of the two most recent designs in the line, the AL10 Mark III of 2008 and the AL20 Mark IV of 2015. But with this 5th generation ALA10 model announced in mid-2022, Lexus wants Europe to start taking the RX seriously again. Two things our continent claims to want from a car like this, a plug-in hybrid variant and a high-performance version, are now incorporated in the range. And a stiffer new GAK platform aims to make this less of a yank tank when it comes to corners too. That chassis also undergirds the two other SUVs that are currently reinventing the Lexus brand, the Mark II version of the mid-sized NX and the all-electric RZ. Alongside this pair, this Mark V RX apparently represents the next chapter for this Japanese manufacturer. A chapter worth your attention if you're about to sign for a more established premium brand large SUV in this segment? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Kart and Driving Road Test, to find out. So, what to expect here? Well, we're promised a slightly more engaging driving experience from this 5th generation model, thanks to a stiffer platform, extra body rigidity, suspension changes, a revised braking setup and weight reductions. But on first acquaintance, for existing RX owners at least, everything will feel comfortably familiar. As usual in an RX, you get in, luxuriate in the beautiful leather seats and enjoy the relatively commanding SUV-style driving position before pressing the starter button to be greeted by, well, nothing. The engine's running, true enough, it's just that at this point, it's doing so silently under battery power alone. If you've a gentle right foot, that's all it will continue to use for the first couple of minutes of any journey at speeds of up to 30 miles an hour, or potentially longer if you happen to have chosen the plug-in hybrid powertrain that Lexus has at last added to the lineup, an RX 450h Plus PHEV model we've also been driving as part of this test. When that plug-in powertrain's 18.1 kilowatt-hour battery runs out of charge, the PHEV RX will revert to the same engine used in the entry-level, non-plug-in, self-charging version, the RX 350h variant we're trying here, which is a self-charging 2.5 litre, 4-cylinder, normally aspirated petrol unit mated with an epicyclic twin-motor hybrid setup featuring a 180 brake horsepower motor on the front axle and another 54 brake horsepower motor at the rear. Sounds complicated, but it's the kind of thing we've been used to on a four-wheel drive Lexus and Toyota SUVs for some time now. Because there's a motor on each axle, the car can offer a somewhat nominal all-wheel drive system. Lexus calls it E4, though one with a very pronounced frontward power bias. And it's all controlled via the usual Toyota Lexus e-CVT belt-driven auto-shift-matic transmission. Maximum power output is 247 brake horsepower in the RX 350h or 304 brake horsepower in the RX 450h Plus. Still with us? Well, if so, then you might additionally want to know that if more power is required from the kind of RX you'd ideally like, there's now also a top performance variant, the RX 500h, which Lexus has felt the need to completely re-engineer to suit its modestly increased power output, rated at 366 brake horsepower. Not with the kind of 3.5 litre V6 engine we saw on the previous generation model. All RXs now have just 4 cylinders, but with a different 4-pot unit, this one 2.4 litres in size and linked to a more conventional 6-speed auto gearbox and the intelligent Direct 4 four-wheel drive system borrowed from the brand's fully electric RZ model. More on engines and performance in a minute, but before we get to that, let's take a closer look at the dynamic confection on offer here. This 5th generation RX is tasked with reaching out beyond its core customer demographic, and by that we primarily mean the undemanding US customers who account for the majority of production. They've never bought an RX because it's exciting and engaging to drive, and nor has anyone in Europe. But rather ambitiously, Lexus wants to change that. As we suggested at the beginning of this section, for the first time in a long time, several generations in fact, the brand has had a complete rethink about how this car should handle, possibly because it now sits on a completely new and much stiffer GAK platform. From that surer foundation, the engineers have developed handling to create what the brand calls the unique Lexus driving signature. The idea here is not to make this RX handle like a BMW X5 or a Porsche Cayenne, but to establish what Lexus calls a dialogue between car and driver, in which that driver always feels confident, comfortable, and in control. In this, the Japanese engineers have been partly successful. The car's been tuned for smooth rather than abrupt changes of direction, and there's precise corner turn-in and plenty of reassuring traction through the bends. Much of this coming courtesy of the new GAK platform's extra rigidity, lower centre of gravity, better weight balance, lighter weight, and increased track width at each end. Having said all that though, unfortunately the need not to alienate portly American folk still predominates, evidenced by over-assisted steering and plenty of cornering roll. As a result, rivals still remain more incisive to drive, and as before, the RX feels a little out of sorts if you start to throw it around, not helped by the fact that it feels a big car on narrow roads, even with the dynamic rear steering system that only comes with the top RX 500h and turns the rear wheels by up to 4%, helping cornering stability at speed. If you're not coming to this SUV from another Lexus, you may also find any urges towards dynamic driving tempered by the fact that, as usual with one of the brand's hybrid models, a slightly different driving style is required here. You don't make a proper hybrid engine go quickly by ramming your right foot to the floor, but by backing off the throttle between ratios in a way that lets the revs drop and the engine bite into its torque curve. Once you understand this, things improve and get better still once you realise that the initially rather dead feel you get when pushing on the accelerator can be mitigated by playing with the drive mode select options you'll now find buried away in the centre screen's vehicle menu. The main options are Eco, Normal and Sport, which tweaks steering and throttle feel, along with gear change response. With the Sport mode activated, which sees the speedometer switch itself into a red-tinged glow, the 2.5-litre VVTi engine used in the mainstream models gathers itself together with a bit more enthusiasm, chipping in with a rather un-Lexus-like urgent thrum. You can't raise your hopes too high in this regard, of course. As usual with full hybrids, mid-range torque is pretty terrible, even if you avoid this entry-level 350h variant. Overtakes have to be planned with care, because there's much less pulling power than you get from a comparable 3-litre diesel, which is why the 2,000 kilo braked towing capacity figure that applies to all versions of this car is substantially less. And on the 450h Plus plug-in model, that body roll we mentioned is further emphasised by the extra 145 kilogram weight of all the PHEV mechanicals if you start to push on a bit too hard through tighter bends. But hey, look at what that particular variant can give you: the incredible ability to virtually ignore petrol stations for all but longer journeys, and afterwards revert not to a thirsty petrol engine, as with rivals, but a more frugal full hybrid. As mitigating factors go, that's a pretty strong one. Talking of engines, earlier we said we'd brief you a little further on those. You might expect this 5th generation RX 350h to be a more feebly performing thing than the previous generation RX 350h, given the switch this time round from V6 to 4-cylinder power, which has resulted in a drop in output from 308 to 247 brake horsepower. Actually, the 0 to 62 mile an hour stat is much the same as before. Rest to 62 miles an hour in 7.9 seconds en route to 124 miles an hour. On paper, the other self-charging full hybrid model in the range, the 366 horsepower RX 500h, is a bit faster, rests to 62 miles an hour in 6.2 seconds en route to 130 miles an hour. But it doesn't really feel like it, because in that top variant, you're carting around 135 kilos of extra body weight. Lexus expects most potential European RX customers to ignore both of these self-charging models and opt instead for the alternative RX 450h Plus plug-in hybrid we mentioned earlier. This PHEV model puts out 304 brake horsepower, makes 62 miles an hour in 6.5 seconds, and offers up to 43 miles of EAER-rated battery-only range. In that plug-in RX, the drive system works just as it does in plug-in versions of the Lexus NX and the Toyota RAV4, which also use the same dual-motor E4 all-wheel drive system and eCVT auto gearbox setup. Pressing a button near the gear stick lets you flip between EV, full electric drive, and the alternative HV mode, the latter being more realistic for normal driving, as it runs the car as a regular full hybrid, the software seamlessly blending in either petrol or electric power sources as required. A full press on the same button connects you to a further charge mode, which sees the engine note rise as it rather inefficiently charges the battery when you're driving. All that might sound quite complicated, but driving an RX 450h Plus really isn't. You don't have to make driving mode choices unless you really want to, because an additional auto EV or HV mode button is also provided, which essentially makes all the decisions for you. Its choices seem effective too, because that advertised 43-mile electric driving range figure turns out to be not beyond the bounds of achievability. Whatever your choice of RX powertrain, you'd expect a cosseting big Lexus SUV to ride serenely, particularly this one, which, as we referenced earlier, has had quite a lot of work done on its damping. All models get new multi-link rear suspension, and the re-engineered all-round setup supposed to better absorb shock and vibration over uneven surfaces. That might be, but to be frank, we were a bit disappointed with the end result, finding the car too easily troubled by transverse ridges and tarmac tears on secondary roads. Yes, even when fitted with the AVS or adaptive variable suspension system you can have with the top 2 trim levels, a setup also supposed to have been heavily revised and fitted out with an extra comfort drive mode setting. Around town, the RX rides more in keeping with its plush remit, and of course it manages beautifully at highway speeds. What else? Well, the re-engineered electronically controlled braking system now delivers significantly more pedal feel. You get shift paddles behind the steering wheel which deliver engine braking force in 6 steps. And highway cruising speeds are as refined as you'd hope from a hybrid, helped in the 450h Plus plug-in model by the fact there's less noise from the hybrid engine as it can run at lower revs compared to this self-charging 350h variant. Noise and vibration are also suppressed by plenty of insulation in the wing linings and front pillars, and the use of acoustic glass for the windscreen and front side windows. The result is exemplary refinement that's difficult to better in this class. What else? Well, earlier we mentioned the on-demand E4 all-wheel drive system fitted to the 2 mainstream models with its 2 electric motors, one powering each axle, which, as we said, theoretically means that this car can drive through all 4 wheels. In practice, though, the rear motor is set to power the rear wheels only when the fronts really can't cope. The rest of the time it acts as a generator to charge the battery when the vehicle is in regenerative brake mode. If you've gathered from that little technical explanation that this RX really isn't suited to heavy off-road work, then you're absolutely right. And the same applies with the Direct 4 all-wheel drive system fitted to the RX 500h. Across the range with this 5th generation design, the ride height's fallen from 208 to a best of 183mm. That, combined with distinctly modest off-road stats, a maximum approach angle of 15 degrees and a maximum departure angle of 24, means you certainly aren't going to get very far on the rough stuff. It's just as well then that few owners will ever be putting these figures to the test. During the winter months though, many of them will very regularly appreciate this car's prowess, powering them through icy mornings and muddy car parks. It knows its market. The RX gets a new visual lease of life in this 5th generation form with a more dynamic look clearly influenced by the brand's full electric RZ model and the smaller NX. This so-called next chapter design language delivers a more confident stance and emulates the spindle body profile of the RZ. No plans are apparently in place to reintroduce the 7-seat RXL body shape offered in the previous generation model, so the target here clearly lies with 5-seater segment rivals like the Jeep Grand Cherokee, the Volkswagen Touareg and the Porsche Cayenne, rather than 7-seaters like the Volvo XC90, the Audi Q7 and the Land Rover Discovery. In profile, the 4.9 metre length hasn't changed, but much else has. The bonnet's been elongated and the A-pillars moved further back. The roofline's 10mm lower, the overhangs are shorter and the bottom edge of the rear windows has been lowered, which, in combination with the high bonnet, compresses the area above the wheels, giving a more solid, well-grounded look. There are sculpted surfaces on the door panels, most notably this upward wave-like suite up the rear door, and an RX signature touch. This blacked out rear pillar panel is emphasised in 3D. Bigger 21-inch wheels, you only get smaller 19-inch rims with base trim, and eye-catching new colour options complete the changes. At the front, the spindle-shaped theme of the previous model is retained, though not as obviously because it's been applied to the entire front end, not just the grille. The top part of the grille spindle is now blocked off, presumably in a nod to the EV revolution, and the rest of it merges into the body along its edges. Slim LED headlamp units with their tick-shaped daytime running light strips are familiar, and black-trimmed vertical corner cutouts, which are narrow here but much wider with F-Sport trim. They simultaneously emphasise the 15mm wider front track and provide the necessary overtaking presence. The track increase is even wider at 45mm at the rear, a change underlined by this full-width light bar. There's a black-trimmed roof spoiler, slim slits decorate the bumper corners, and an impractically shiny silver-trimmed panel on the lower diffuser section emphasises this RX aversion to off-road adventures. Under the skin sits the same GAK platform used in the smaller NX and RZ models, so it's had to be significantly stretched here. Nevertheless, the chassis contributes significantly to this fifth generation model's slightly lighter weight by a useful 90 kilos, additionally aided by the new use of aluminium for the bonnet and front wings. The less is more mantra, Lexus says, has also been carried forward to the redesigned interior, in which the company's aimed to dispense with all superfluous details in favour of a cool, contemporary look with clean, uncluttered surfaces. Doesn't sound too welcoming though, does it? But fortunately, the usual inviting signs of what Lexus calls omotenashi hospitality begin as you approach and open the car. The door handles, puddle lamps and daytime running lamps illuminate. And opening the door lights up the instrument panel with a personalised greeting once you've registered your key. And sure enough, as promised, there's an evolved level of design simplicity here. Firstly, in the screen fest that initially greets your eyes, dispensing with quite a few of the previous switches and buttons, but also in the way the dashboard sweeps in a clean, continuous form, taking in the meter hood, instrument panel and the door trims. Plus, the adoption of the clever electronic e-latch door release system from the NX has allowed the interior handles to be moved down and the upper section of the door cards to be carved out, creating a natural extension of the instrument panel. At the same time though, as always with the RX, the cabin retains that familiar expensive feeling of Lexus Takumi handcrafted luxury that, as usual with this model line, goes above and beyond anything that comparably priced competitors offer. It's not just about stitched leather and elegant surfacing either, though there's plenty of that. The less obvious details have really been sweated over here. Even opening and closing the door feels and sounds different, apparently. Lots of development time was spent on that. And there are also lots of little touches that you won't properly discover until you've spent time with the car, like the way the electric windows slow in the final few millimetres of raising, or the way that the climate concierge system's S-flow control recognises which seats are occupied, directing heating or cooling performance accordingly, taking into account ambient temperature and even the effect of sunlight through the windows. Most versions also get an ambient cabin lighting setup with 64 colours, 14 of them predefined, to reflect different moods inspired by nature. And some cabin functions trigger a musical sound, the seatbelt reminders and the clearance sonars, for instance, the tone of which was apparently curated by a Japanese jazz musician named Jiro Yoshida. As in the smaller NX, this RX adopts the brand's latest interior philosophy, christened Tazuna, which aims to put all the controls within easy reach of the driver and better allow that person to focus on the road ahead. Given that goal, you'd expect to find a BMW iDrive-like lower rotary controller for this enormous centre display, but no. The rather considerable number of things the supposedly evolved voice control system still struggles to do, drive mode selection for instance, must all be done by arm's length screen stabbing, which to some extent undoes all the Tazuna design's good intentions in keeping you concentrated on the road ahead, with things like touch tracer control pads on the steering wheel spokes, the features for which neatly show up on the 10-inch head-up display when your fingers pass across them. Initially, these touch tracer pads seem fiddly to use and keep activating when you don't want them to. But once you get the hang of them though, you realise they're quite useful, altering not only what shows in the 3-format head-up display, but also what you can choose to view on the 7-inch Tazuna cockpit HD screen in the instrument binnacle. The left touch tracer pad deals with audio features, the right one for driving functions, and what you select appears in the lower half of the binnacle's single central gauge. Choose between an energy flow monitor, audio settings, navigation arrows, a G-force meter, driving support camera features a fuel and power consumption meter and a readout with average speed and elapsed time. The binnacle screen isn't big enough to show the full width mapping you'd get from rival models in this class, but the display is neatly presented with its single central dial, flanked by crescent-shaped battery charge and fuel readouts. That central gauge switches from being a power meter to a rev counter when you activate the car's sport drive setting. As we suggested earlier though, the screen that will cause most comment the first time you enter this 5th generation RX is this huge 14-inch HD Lexus Link Pro infotainment display. It aggressively dominates the centre of the cabin and sadly leaves no room for the previous model's elegant centre dash analogue clock. This middle monitor really is very different to the previous generation model's old Lexus premium navigation setup. And not only because the size has increased from 12.3 inches. For a start, there's no silly lower trackpad to operate the thing, which on the old car was almost impossible to use on a bumpy road. And it's apparently 3.6 times faster in response and benefits from continual over-the-air updates, wireless Apple CarPlay and the supposedly more intuitive dynamic voice recognition system we referenced earlier, commands for which must be prefaced with "Hey Lexus." It's not immediately obvious at first glance how to surf around the various functions on this screen until closer inspection reveals that there's no home page, just a slim list of tiny shortcut functions along the monitor's right-hand frame for navigation, phone activation and vehicle features, plus a web browser and a settings menu. And there's also a shortcut for music, of course, an area in which an RX owner is very well catered for. Even in the standard 12-speaker system has a 20-centimetre box subwoofer, and further up the range there's a superb 21-speaker Mark Levinson premium surround sound setup, which is as good as that description sounds. Most of what you'll regularly want to use lies in this Lexus Link Pro monitor's vehicle section, which unfortunately is where access to the car's various drive modes has now been buried away. The vehicle section also enables you to view an energy flow monitor plus selectable screens which show all-wheel drive activation, trip info, drive assist features and allow you to set charging times for the plug-in model. Enough with screens, what else might you need to know here? Well, the seats are usually a highlight of any Lexus cabin, and so it is here. These front chairs are now even more comfortable than before, thanks to a reshaped cushion, a so-called deep-hung upholstery design, and a revised frame supposed to improve body holding performance through turns, where a previous RX owner might also notice the structure's now more concave shape, intended to improve support for your waist. All models get various kinds of leather, plus heat and power adjustment for these front chairs, and with higher spec, there's cooled ventilation and extendable front cushions too, plus the company's Nano E air purifying system. What about practicalities? Seeing out, for instance. Well, Lexus has worked quite hard on this, employing a new ergonomic design for the area around the rather thick front pillars to give a better sightline when cornering. Accurate line tracing is also aided by the raised front edge of the bonnet, which makes it easier to judge the vehicle's corners. Plus, to make manoeuvring easier, the designers have optimised the height of the central bonnet bulge and thinned out the rear quarter pillars, which you'll notice when, say, you're looking rearwards whilst merging onto a motorway. You're further aided, of course, by the decently commanding driving position and by all-round parking sensors and a reversing camera, upgraded on most models to the excellent 360-degree panoramic view monitor we have here. Takumi spec gets you a digital rear-view mirror as well, and build quality from the Japanese factory seems pretty faultless. And there are various colourful upholstery choices as an alternative to the unrelenting black finish offered by most rivals. It's not all good, of course. The centre screen has an annoying legal message on startup that it's impossible to get rid of unless you fiddle with the settings of the Lexus app. And for some reason, the Android Auto smartphone mirroring system has to be of the old tech wired sort. And turning off some of the more annoying safety systems like the bonging that afflicts you when you stray a single mile an hour over the speed limit seems to require an IT degree in screen menu usage. As for cabin storage, well, there are some neat touches, like this deep box between the seats that cleverly can be opened on both sides. Silver-framed cup holders with integrated clasps sit just in front, though lack a cover or the neat heating and cooling features you'd find on a comparable BMW. Lexus has forgotten an overhead sunglasses compartment, or more likely didn't think one would fit in concert with this optional panoramic glass roof. A cubby at the base of the centre stack has twin USB-C ports. Just above, a further lower compartment with a sliding top that now has a 50% more powerful wireless mat, along with both USB-A and USB-C ports. The glove box and the door pockets are of a decent size. You get a fold-down cubby by the driver's right knee, and there's a ticket slot on the facing side of the driver's sun visor. Time to move to the rear. Now you exit via the little E-latch electronic release door catches we mentioned earlier, which you'll initially find fiddly until you realise that to activate you either push once or pull twice. Lexus claims that this allows the door to be opened with a smooth, simple and near silent motion inspired by the traditional soji sliding room dividers in Japanese homes. The opening process doesn't seem much different to us, but we do approve of the way that the E-latch system allows installation of a safe exit assist setup that prevents you from opening the door in the face of oncoming pedestrians or traffic. As mentioned earlier, this time round Lexus is only offering this single standard 5-seat RX body shape. So if you're hoping for a replacement for the previous generation design's lengthier RXL 7-seat body style, you'll be disappointed. We told you earlier that the body length of this 5th generation RX hasn't increased, but crucially, wheelbase length has, by a significant 60mm. That should improve things for rear-seated folk. Access is aided by a lower hip point, and there's a little more rear space this time round with 830mm of legroom, though you can no longer slide the seat base back to improve it. The backrest reclines though, with electrical assistance if you stretch to the very top of the range. And we remain actually quite surprised just how much headroom there is in an RX, up to 940mm in this Mark V version, given that this bench sits directly on top of the 3 battery packs that power the hybrid drive system. This is fortunate, for otherwise headroom would be at something of a premium, especially on top models fitted with the brand's huge panoramic glass sunroof. It also helps that the RX does without the kind of high centre transmission tunnel that features on most of its rivals. So, though the centre part of this rear bench isn't particularly comfortable, it is easier to transport 3 adults in this car than would normally be the case with models in this segment. Thinner rear 3/4 pillars are supposed to provide more knee room here at the back and a better view to the side and ahead, helped by this 5th generation model's lower beltline and wider forward field vision. If your RX has dark upholstery and you haven't specified the aforementioned glass roof, you'll be glad of these rear quarter-light windows, which prevent it from being too dark and dismal back here. A centre armrest features a lidded compartment and twin pop-up cup holders. The seat backs have deep pockets, the doors have proper bottle holders, and you get tri-zone climate controls for these 2 centre vents, with connectivity ports nearby or at the top of the range, a useful AC 220 volt or 150 watt 3-pin socket. There are twin overhead reading lights, coat hooks in the overhead grab handles, and plusher models get seat heating and cooling and side window pull-up blinds. We'll finish with a look out back. Now, as you'd expect, every RX variant gets a powered tailgate, and above entry trim, it'll come with a kick sensor too. Plus, it no longer operates with arthritic slowness thanks to a new low-speed or high-speed torque spindle-type electric motor, which has halved the operation time to around 4 seconds. You can set the opening height to a preferred level, say to avoid hitting a low garage ceiling, for instance. Once everything's open, there are various surprises in store, and not all of them good. First, that the aforementioned wheelbase length increase has only improved boot capacity by a meagre 8 litres. Second, that the resulting 461 litre total, up to window level, is actually 64 litres less than the smaller mid-sized Lexus NX. And thirdly, that unlike nearly all its rivals, the PHEV version of this model doesn't have its luggage space at all compromised by an underfloor battery. That's just as well, because by segment standards, the space you get back here really isn't very good at all. To take just 2 examples, a Porsche Cayenne offers 772 litres. With a Volkswagen Touareg, it's 810 litres. In other words, there's a practical price to pay for all that clever hybrid tech. Cargo access is aided by a slightly lower loading lip, and beneath the floor there are small compartments to store extra stuff you won't want cluttering up the main boot, the charging leads for the PHEV version, for example. Lexus says that the main luggage area can take up to 612 litres if you load to the roof, with up to 1,050 millimetres of cargo area length and 430 millimetres of cargo area height, all of which would apparently be enough for 4 9.5-inch golf bags or 2 77-litre and 2 63-litre suitcases. If you're cramming cases like that in on an airport run, the facility to sharpen the angle of the rear backrest will be useful. There are 4 silver tie-downs, bag hooks on both sides and a 12-volt socket on the left. If you need more space, you'll be pleased to find that the centre part of the rear backrest splits separately so that you can more easily transport longer items like skis. On the top Takumi variant, you get a power folding and raising mechanism for the main parts of the rear backrest, operated by electrical retraction switches here on the left. Use them to retract the bench, and though the cargo area created isn't completely flat, it is 1,678 litres in size. As you'd expect from Lexus, there are no conventional engines offered in this 5th generation RX lineup, which, unlike with most rivals, means there are no mild hybrids and no diesels. We won't get the conventional RX 350 non-hybrid petrol version offered in other markets, and there's no full electric RX variant either. There doesn't need to be, because the brand's RZ450e EV model fills that niche and is very closely related to this car. This time round, Lexus is only offering this single 5-seat standard body style. There seems to be no plans to reprise the previous RX L 7-seat version. What about pricing? Well, there's quite a step up from the previous generation RX model, as was necessary given that the next model down in the range, the mechanically very similar mid-sized NX, now sells in the £45,000 to £60,000 bracket. We'll quote you RX asking figures as they were from launch in late 2022 and at the time of this test in early summer 2023. Things kick off with this self-charging full hybrid 350h variant costing from around £62,000 as we filmed. The alternative for most customers is this more powerful plug-in hybrid 450h Plus version we've also been trying here, priced from around £67,000. Either way, whether you go for the 350h or the 450h Plus, there's a choice of 4 core trim levels: Premium Pack, Premium Plus Pack, as in the case of this RX 350h, F-Sport Design and Takumi, as in the case of this RX 450h Plus plug-in version. All 350h and 450h Plus variants get the brand's E4 four-wheel drive system and hybrid automatic transmission. It's a slightly different mechanical formula at the very top of the range, with a top, more performance-orientated flagship version, the RX 500h, which reverts to a self-charging full hybrid powertrain and costs from £77,000. To handle its extra power and torque, this comes with a more conventional 6-speed automatic gearbox and direct 4 all-wheel drive system. The RX 500h comes with its own more dynamic-looking F-Sport trim package, though if you really want more, you can spend another £5,000 and embellish it with a Takumi pack. Right, let's give you some value perspective on those figures, starting with where this car fits in the Lexus lineup. We've already told you how it's priced above Lexus's mid-level SUV, the NX. You might be interested to know that an NX 450h plug-in with exactly the same drivetrain as an RX 450h plug-in would save you around £12,000 over that car. You might also be interested in the way that the brand has priced its EV alternative to this RX, the RZ 450e all-electric model we mentioned earlier. That's pitched in the £65,000 to £75,000 bracket, so around the same as an RX, but in size, the RZ is much closer to an NX than an RX. Got all that? Good. The Japanese maker hopes, though, that if you're considering an RX, it won't be as an alternative to another Lexus. It might not be as an alternative to anything, because once you get right down to it, there's nothing else in the segment that offers you the full hybrid, self-charging engine we've got here. If you're looking at this base RX 350h and you're prepared to be flexible on that point in your search for a large 5-seat luxury SUV, there are various ways we could point you. For around £60,000 at the time of this test, around £2,000 less than this RX 350h, you could consider a couple of unelectrified models. The Volkswagen Touareg in base 3-litre TDI, 231 PS diesel form, or the Genesis GV80 in 2.5-litre petrol guise. Spend around £67,000 and you can get a base 3-litre V6 petrol Porsche Cayenne, another unelectrified model. 3 petrol mild hybrid models complete our portfolio of large segment 5-seat luxury SUV alternatives. The Audi Q8 55T FSI around £69,000, the BMW X6 xDrive 40i around £76,000, and the Maserati Levante GT Hybrid around £80,000 as we filmed. What all these SUV RX alternatives have in common is that they will cost you vastly more to run than an RX 350h, and most of them will cost a lot more to buy if you spec them up to a similar level. You'd think it might be slightly easier to find segment alternatives to this RX 450h Plus plug-in model, but no. The obvious difference to class rivals lies in the fact that when this RX plug-in model's EV range is used up, it reverts to a self-charging full hybrid petrol power plant. With competitors in this class, you'll be reverting to a thirsty conventional petrol engine. We told you earlier that the RX 450h Plus was priced from launch from around £67,000. The closest, most obvious rival to that is Jeep's Grand Cherokee 4xe, which costs from around £70,000, but has a lower EV range figure. As we filmed, Volkswagen's Touareg R, another PHEV, cost around £74,000 and offered a lot more power but less frugality. Around £77,000 would get you Porsche's Cayenne E Hybrid, but that can't get near the efficiency figures of an RX 450h Plus. If you could find another 20 grand over the cost of an RX 450h Plus, then the Mercedes GLE 400e might tempt you. But as well as being much pricier, that car is also significantly less powerful, though it does have a much longer EV range capability. As for the top RX 500h, well, we're really struggling to think of alternatives there. As we said, there are no other self-charging full hybrids in the segment. The 500h model's £77,000 to £80,000 price point would open up access to various other models in this sector, of course, but they'd all be pricier conventional petrol models. Porsche's Cayenne S at around £81,000, for instance, or even pricier plug-in hybrids. Right, enough with rivals. Let's assume you've decided that it is an RX of some sort that you really want. So just how generous has Lexus been with specification this time round? Well, let's take a look at that now. And start with what you get on all RX models, a fair bit, as it happens. LED headlights with automatic high beam, power folding mirrors, roof rails, a powered tailgate, the e-latch, electronic door opening system, keyless smart entry, rear privacy glass, auto headlamps and wipers, all-round parking sensors, headlamp cleaners, a Thatcham Category 1 alarm, and a very complete portfolio of Lexus Safety System Plus camera safety kit, which we'll brief you on in a few moments. Inside, with all RX models, you get a digital instrument cluster, powered steering adjustment, a 4-setting drive mode select system, a heated steering wheel and triple zone climate control, plus heated and 8-way power adjustable front seats, a wireless smartphone charger and ambient cabin lighting. Infotainment's taken care of by a 14-inch Lexus Link Pro multimedia centre infotainment screen with HD graphics, over-the-air updates, Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring, and the 12-speaker DAB premium sound system. This display also includes a cloud-based embedded navigation system and comes with a 4-year data subscription package. Across the range, owners can also use the provided Lexus Link app on their smartphone. The connected services offered with that include locking and unlocking the vehicle, opening the tailgate, operating the steering wheel and seat heaters, and adjusting the climate control to heat or cool the vehicle ahead of setting out on a journey. The car's hazard lights can also be remotely illuminated, for example, to help spot the car in a busy car park. These things are in addition to established Lexus Link services such as driving analytics, hybrid coaching and fuel level monitoring. Additional Lexus Link functions available for the RX 450h Plus include monitoring of battery charge level, charge scheduling and a charging timer. With entry-level premium pack variants, you get all of this along with Tahara synthetic leather upholstery and 19-inch alloy wheels. If you can find another £6,000 for this mid-level Premium Plus pack trim, that'll be changed for upholstery in real smooth leather and larger 21-inch wheel rims. In addition, with Premium Plus pack spec, you also get ventilated front seats, a head-up display, a 360-degree panoramic view monitor, the fancier ambient cabin lighting with 64 colours and the brand's Tazuna cockpit package with its touch tracer steering wheel switches. Along with leather steering wheel trim, memory settings for the driver's seat, a kick sensor for the rear tailgate, and a package of extra safety features which we'll cover off for you in a moment. The alternative F-Sport design trim grade basically mirrors the Premium Plus trim level, but brings a sportier look, courtesy of an F-Sport mesh grille and rear bumper, plus black door mirror casings and roof rails. Plus silver inserts in the door mirrors and the dark grey front and rear lower bumpers, gloss black finished 21-inch alloy wheels and all silver F-Sport badges. Want more? Well, then if your priority is luxury, you'll be directed to the Takumi spec we have here. This pricey trim level has a panoramic roof, semi-aniline leather upholstery, 10-way powered front seat adjustment with 4-way lumbar support, heated power adjustable rear seats, rear side window sunshade blinds, a wood and leather steering wheel, a digital rear view mirror, a 220-volt AC inverter for the back seat, and a thumping Mark Levinson 21-speaker premium surround audio system. There's also intelligent blade scan headlamps, adaptive variable suspension, remote and automatic parking functions, and triple zone air conditioning with a Nano-E air quality function. Those last 4 features are also included in the top RX 500h model's bespoke F-Sport trim level. With that, you also get the brand's dynamic rear steering system, which can turn the rear wheels at up to 4 degrees, improving low-speed manoeuvrability and helping maintain stability at high speeds. The RX 500h also gets bespoke design F-Sport 21-inch wheels with black brake calipers, an F-Sport styling pack, active sound control, and F-Sport cabin touches, including branded upholstery. As for options, well, as usual with Lexus, there aren't too many. You can pay extra for a sunroof with the base premium pack models, or pay extra for a panoramic roof with the mid-range Premium Plus pack derivatives. With the RX 500h, there's an optional Takumi pack, which adds a panoramic roof, heated and ventilated power adjustable rear seats, a digital rear view mirror, the Mark Levinson 21 speaker premium surround audio system, and the 220 volt AC inverter for the back seat. Across the RX range, metallic mica paint is included in various colours, but Lexus wants £250 extra for its various special metallic paint sonic shades in white, grey, platinum, titanium, or this rather striking sonic copper finish. Accessories include side steps, a towing hitch and roof crossbars upon which the bike holder can be attached. You can also include stylised touches like puddle lamps, an illuminated trunk scuff or side scuff plates, a chrome rear lower trunk garnish and chromed side sills. Practical touches include textile floor mats, a trunk liner, a rear seat protector, mud flaps and a safety kit. For the RX 450h Plus plug-in variant, Lexus can also sell you a branded connected wall box. Let's finish, as we always do, with a detailed look at safety. Now, we should start by saying that this 5th generation RX gets an even stronger, safer structure this time round, with enlarged front side members, a new cross member in the floor, and a new high tensile steel frame at the back, which can better withstand a rear impact. Otherwise, it's all about camera and radar-based safety kit. The previous generation RX was one of the first of the brand's models to feature the Lexus Safety System Plus package, equipping it with a comprehensive array of active safety and driver assistance features. At first glance, it doesn't look a lot different to the package supplied here, but actually quite a lot's been done here in terms of upgrades and extra features, made possible by enhancement of the detection range of the car's millimetre wave radar and camera. Let's start with the autonomous braking setup. Lexus calls its PCS, its pre-collision system, and with this, capabilities have been extended so that it can now detect motorcycles and pedestrians in the car's path. That setup additionally gains a new function that identifies high collision risks with oncoming traffic or crossing pedestrians and cyclists when making a turn at an intersection. Also now incorporated into PCS is an emergency steering assist function, which provides assistance triggered by the driver's use of the wheel to automatically control steering when there's a high risk of a collision, helping to keep the vehicle stable and within its traffic lane. Plus, a neat acceleration suppression function that's been added into the setup, which helps prevent unintended sharp acceleration when travelling at low speed. These various improvements should, Lexus reckons, enable the PCS system to detect up to 36% more accident risk scenarios than before. We wouldn't doubt it. Apart from autonomous braking, the other thing you expect on a modern family car is a lane keeping system. This Lexus has two: LDA, or lane departure alert, to warn you if you're drifting out of lane, and lane trace assist to keep you centred in your lane. Both setups have been further refined for this Mark V RX model, with LDA made more intuitive so that it can activate warning and restraint functions when it's judged that the driver is making a deliberate manoeuvre to avoid a person or parked vehicle. The system can also now recognise some solid objects, such as curbs, guardrails, walls and utility poles, giving more natural lane tracing performance. The Lane Trace Assist, meanwhile, has enhanced recognition performance, giving smoother and less abrupt steering support. For example, when overtaking a vehicle in an adjacent lane, or when driving close to a roadside structure, the tracing position is offset from the centre of the road to the avoidance side, again following a driver's natural instinct. What else? Well, as you'd expect, the Lexus Safety System Plus package includes automatic high beam and a blind spot monitor to alert you if you're about to dangerously pull out in front of another vehicle. A setup in this 5th generation RX neatly linked into the car's all-new Safe Exit Assist feature that's been made possible by the new e-latch electronic entry and exit system built into the doors. If the blind spot monitor detects traffic approaching from the rear and an attempt is made to open any door, the unlatching will be cancelled until the danger has passed. Lexus believes this innovative system could help prevent 95% of the accidents caused by door opening. The blind spot monitor system also incorporates rear cross traffic alert, which will warn you of approaching traffic when you're reversing out of a space and, if necessary, brake the car to avoid a collision. Another key camera safety area Lexus has worked on for this 5th generation RX is its DRCC, or Dynamic Radar Cruise Control system, now improved so that it can more quickly recognise and adjust to traffic cutting in front of your RX. Working in conjunction with lane trace assist, it will allow a more natural line through bends and decelerate earlier in accordance with the sharpness of the curve. A new indicator-linked pre-acceleration function automatically accelerates the car up to its target speed to shorten the distance to the vehicle ahead in preparation for changing lane to overtake. And similarly, the system will slow the RX when the indicator is used to move into a lane behind a slower vehicle, giving a more natural feel to the driving assistance. All good, and if, like us, you really don't like people undertaking on the highway, well, this car won't do it, because it features Lexus's first overtake prevent function, which will automatically reduce cruising speed to avoid undertaking vehicles in the adjacent lane. The system works in conjunction with another standard Lexus safety system feature, RSA, or road sign assist, which has been expanded to respond to more signs and commands, these now including warning and stop signs. When RSA recognises a change in the speed limit, the system alerts the driver to adjust the car's cruising speed accordingly. That's great for highway use, but of course a lot of your RX driving will be done in town. For that, Lexus has developed what it calls proactive driving assist, specifically for lower speeds in urban traffic. It provides 3 functions: obstacle anticipation assist, deceleration assist, and steering assist. Using the car's front camera, obstacle anticipation assist will spot hazards such as pedestrians about to cross the road, cyclists, and parked cars. If there's a collision risk, it will provide braking and steering to avoid the obstacle while keeping within the traffic lane. It differs from the RX's pre-collision system in recognising an accident risk earlier and initiating assistance so that the risk does not increase. Deceleration assist supports smooth slowing of the car when the driver takes their foot off the accelerator, for example, when approaching another vehicle or a bend ahead. If the system determines that normal engine braking will not slow the car sufficiently, it applies extra braking. Steering assist, meanwhile, helps keep the vehicle in its traffic lane when driving through a bend. The system will detect road markings for a curve ahead, calculate the radius, and adjust the steering assistance for a correct line. If the steering angle is insufficient, extra steering assistance is provided to make it easier for the driver to turn the wheel in the right direction. In straight line driving, the system reduces the level of steering assistance, making it easier to keep the car in a neutral position. As for more conventional passive safety kit fitted across the RX range, well, pretty much everything you'd expect is present and correct. So, tick off a pedestrian-friendly bonnet, ISOFIX child seat fastenings, anti-whiplash head restraints, an emergency brake signal for panic stops, and a full complement of SRS airbags, including front centre and front passenger seat cushion airbags, all linked to an e-call system that will automatically alert the emergency services with your exact GPS location in the event of any bag being activated in an accident. As a result of this and all the camera safety provision, the experts at Euro NCAP awarded this RX a top 5-star rating for both in-car and pedestrian safety. What else? Well, across the lineup, you'll also find a tyre pressure monitoring system and hill start assist control to stop you from drifting backwards on uphill junctions. In addition, there are all the usual electronic driving aids for braking, traction and stability, systems that in most other cars will only activate at the last minute if the situation demands it. In an RX though, it's all done a bit more cleverly. The so-called Lexus Vehicle Dynamics Integration Management setup, coordinating everything together and taking action to correct the car just that little bit earlier. There are three distinct versions of the RX this time round, two self-charging full hybrids or a PHEV. Here we're trying the most affordable full hybrid self-charging 350h version with a powertrain that you can't plug in but which can run fully electrically, independently of the combustion unit for some of the time, a formula still ignored by all this car's most direct SUV rivals. That drive format uses a 2.5 litre hybrid petrol power plant with 247 brake horsepower controlled via the usual Toyota Lexus CVT belt-driven auto shiftmatic transmission. And it comes mated to the brand's usual E4 drivetrain, featuring a 180 brake horsepower motor on the front axle and another 54 brake horsepower motor at the rear. The RX 350h manages up to 44.8 mpg on the combined cycle and up to 143 grams per kilometre of CO2, which facilitates a benefit-in-kind tax rating of up to 33%. The alternative RX 450h Plus plug-in variant we've also been trying as part of this test gets basically the same engine, transmission and drivetrain arrangement, but total outputs raised to 304 brake horsepower to compensate for the extra 145 kilogram weight of the PHEV system's big 18.1 kilowatt-hour battery. That delivers a potential EAER rated EV driving range of up to 43 miles. Battery life you can replenish via a conventional 230 volt 32 amp connection in around 2 hours and 45 minutes. The 450h Plus offers a CO2 reading of up to 25 grams per kilometre and a BIK tax rating of just 8%. It's a rather different story if you choose the RX 500h model at the top of the range. This is another self-charging full hybrid, but in this case powers up to 366 brake horsepower, and Lexus has added a conventional 6-speed auto gearbox and the intelligent Direct 4 all-wheel drive system from its all-electric RZ model. The RX 500h manages up to 35.3 mpg, up to 182 grams per kilometre of CO2, and is BIK tax rated at up to 37%. Whichever flavour of RX you prefer, this 5th generation model has been engineered to deliver what the brand calls its Lexus driving signature, a supposedly ideal combination of comfort and handling dynamics apparently honed by professional racing drivers. You shouldn't get your hopes up too high here, but this does actually represent quite a step forward by Lexus standards. The reasons why lie with extra rigidity, lower centre of gravity, better weight balance, lighter weight and increased track width. Much of this thanks to this Mark V model's newly acquired GAK chassis, plus a fresh suspension design which, as before, can be had with AVS or adaptive variable suspension, adaptive damping, if you opt for an F Sport or Takumi model. As we said recently when we tested the brand's mid-sized NX model, Lexus executives must have been rubbing their hands over the last few years as the media backlash against diesel power got into full swing. Even so, that's been a hard habit for customers in the segment for large luxury SUVs to kick, particularly as from other brands the only alternatives being offered to diesel power are ineffectual mild hybrids or premium-priced PHEVs. Which is why this RX model's self-charging full hybrid focus may well charm you, particularly when it comes to issues of efficiency. Just look at the figures if you want convincing. Typical amongst fuel and CO2 returns from 5-seat large luxury SUVs in this sector, with mild hybrid engine tech is the Audi Q8 55 TFSI, which manages 26.4 miles per gallon on the combined cycle and 243 grams per kilometre of CO2. Even a smoky Volkswagen Touareg 3-litre TDI diesel can only manage 34.9 mpg and 213 grams per kilometre. Now look at what you get from the RX 350h self-charging full hybrid petrol Lexus we're trying here. 44.8 mpg on the combined cycle and 143 grams per kilometre of CO2. Quite a difference. Sadly, that's not rewarded by the UK government with a significantly lower tax rating than rivals like these. The 350h attracts 33 to 34% BIK status. The other self-charging full hybrid model in the range, the RX 500h, manages 35.3 mpg and 182 grams per kilometre and is BIK rated at 37%. By the way, if you're not familiar with the differences between the mild hybrid engines offered by German premium branded entry-level models in this segment and the full hybrid power plant used in conventional form by 350h and 500h versions of this RX, well, it's quite simple. With a mild hybrid unit, the car can never run solely on all-electric drive. The full hybrid system, in contrast, allows the electric motor to sometimes operate independently of the petrol engine. And thanks to this, the car's often able to revert into an all-electric drive format, and you can even force your RX to operate that way by pressing the EV button provided near the gear stick. The EV function is only available for just over a mile though, and it won't work at all if you exceed 30 miles an hour or if for some reason the batteries aren't charged up. To begin with, you may find these limitations somewhat frustrating, but in practice, when the drivetrain's being used normally, this Lexus uses its EV allocation only in very small chunks, between which the battery resource is constantly being replenished by brake energy regeneration. As a result, when you're in built-up areas and stop-start traffic, you'll find that once the car's properly warmed up, the engine will nearly always be ready to function in silent, all-electric milk float mode. For real efficiency savings though, you'll need to get yourself the version of this RX that you can plug in, the 450h Plus variant that we've also been trying as part of this test. This derivative has a whole clutch of sector rivals who at first glance seem to use much the same engine technology, so you might not expect the same kind of efficiency advantage in segment that the more affordable 350h model enjoys. Well, yes and no. The RX 450h Plus has a smaller 18.1 kilowatt-hour battery than some of its competitors, hence a 43-mile EAER rated range that's 17 miles down on the class leader in this respect, the Mercedes GLE 400e. With that Mercedes though, as with other similar PHEVs in the class like the Jeep Grand Cherokee 4xe, the Porsche Cayenne e-Hybrid and the Volkswagen Touareg R, the difference comes when you run out of EV range, as of course beyond the city limits you quickly inevitably will. At that point, in all the competitors just mentioned, you revert to a big thirsty petrol engine. In an RX 450h Plus, in contrast, you revert to the much more frugal, self-charging full hybrid power plant of the lesser RX 350h, which, as we've already seen, is the most efficient choice in its class. That's why the RX 450h Plus model's 25 grams per kilometre CO2 figure all but matches the emissions reading of a Mercedes GLE 400e, despite significantly inferior EV range. Hence this Lexus model's same low 8% BIK tax rating. As with any PHEV, the RX 450h Plus model's 3-figure combined cycle fuel figure, here WLTP rated at 256.8 mpg, can be taken with a pinch of salt, but 35 to 40 mpg as a regular reading should certainly be well within any owner's real-world scope. Whichever kind of RX you decide upon, at higher speeds you'll need to bear in mind that the quoted fuel figures are even more heavily dependent than normal on the driver assuming a significant degree of restraint. Certainly for noteworthy levels of frugality, in day-to-day use with this Lexus, you'll need to keep extreme right foot flexing to a minimum and frequently select the most frugal eco drive mode from the big centre screen, a setting which moderates throttle response and engine power output while tweaking the climate control. Plus, you'll also need to keep a very careful eye on the provided hybrid system indicator central dial in the instrument binnacle, making sure that it stays as often as possible out of its top power section and in its left-hand charge or eco zones. You can monitor the hybrid system's cleverness on the selectable energy flow display you'll find on the instrument binnacle screen and, more colourfully, on the centre console monitor. There's a selectable eco meter gauge in the instrument cluster that also shows your average mile per kilowatt hour energy usage, and the centre dash display also provides graphical trip info, current and history screens, so you can gauge your ongoing mile per kilowatt hour energy consumption. Finally, the instrument binnacle screen shows your driving range in both EV and HV or hybrid drive. Talking of electric driving range, if you've opted for a plug-in RX, it's worth pointing out that EV range readings in colder conditions are preserved by the standard incorporation of an energy-saving heat pump, which draws thermal energy from the air outside the car to heat the cabin, which means less impact on the car's EV driving capability. All the technology in play here might make you worry about this Lexus model's reliability in either of its forms, but the Prius-derived engineering scores very highly in almost every customer satisfaction survey going, which is thanks to some very careful engineering. Take, for instance, the way that the hybrid system operates an automatic warm-up phase to help protect the petrol engine against the excessive wear that might occur if it was called upon to make regular cold starts, then run almost immediately at motorway speeds. To guard against potential issues here, power is initially slightly limited on really cold mornings, then progressively increased. If you've stretched up to the RX 450h Plus plug-in model, you'll want to know about charging it. Well, you can actually refresh the battery while you're driving the car. There's a provided battery charging mode for that. Press and hold this button on the console between the seats. But we wouldn't suggest that you regularly use it, because that mode really isn't very efficient. Better to plug in what is actually quite a large battery for a PHEV, 18.1 kilowatt hours in size, containing 96 cells with a rated voltage of 355.2 volts. Its charging times are aided by a 6.6 kilowatt onboard charger, which is why it takes only 2.5 hours to replenish those cells from a conventional 7.4 kilowatt garage wall box using a 230 volt 32 amp connection. Connect up to a feebler power source like a domestic socket, and you're looking at replenishment in 8 hours and 15 minutes, so still comfortably achievable overnight if, say, you happen to be away at a hotel or staying over with friends. You can set charging times using the car's centre screen or by using the provided Lexus Link app. And via this app, you can also defrost the windows and either preheat or pre-cool the cabin before you reach the car, so you won't have to spend climate system energy doing so once you're underway. The Lexus Link app additionally allows RX 450h Plus owners to check battery charge and driving range and find public charging stations in the Lexus charging network. There are about 160,000 of them across Europe, with around 30,000 of those in the UK. On to after-sales cover. Now, it's worth pointing out that Lexus gives you a much better warranty than the limited 3-year one you'll get with most premium rivals. From the showroom, the car comes with a 3-year warranty, but providing you continue to regularly maintain it at one of the brand's franchise dealerships, 12 months of extra warranty cover will be included with every scheduled service, up to 100,000 miles or 10 years, whichever comes first. Servicing intervals are rather frequent though, every year or 10,000 miles, whichever comes first, and fixed price servicing plans are available if you want to spread the cost of maintenance, allowing you to spread the cost over 2 years or more. However you go about paying for maintenance on an RX, it shouldn't cost you too much. The hybrid setup has a good record for minimising tyre wear, and its battery will last the life of the car. Plus, the regenerative braking setup helps extend the life of the brake pads over 60,000 miles of driving. The front pads should only need replacing once, while the rear pads and all discs will probably last the full distance. What else might you need to know? Well, what about vehicle excise duty? The RX 350h falls into VED Band H, which at the time of filming in summer 2023 meant first year road tax at £255. It's Band J for the RX 500h, which means a first year VED cost of £1,040. For the RX 450h Plus plug-in, it's VED Band B, so you'll only pay £10 of road tax in the first year. Lexus residual values are usually strong, and this car's no exception. The smaller NX holds on to around 50% of its value after 3 years of use, and we'd expect this RX to get pretty close to that. And let's finish with a look at insurance groupings. The RX 350h rates at between 42E and 43E. The RX 450h Plus plug-in is in group 44E to 45E, and the top RX 500h is group 46E. Want a large luxury SUV that's fully battery powered? Well, for all kinds of very justifiable reasons, you may not. In which case, the next best thing is fully electrified, self-charging, full hybrid engine tech. And if you want that in this segment, this 5th generation Lexus RX is the model you have to have. But is the car itself an equally attractive proposition? Well, not all the technology is easy to live with, and it won't suit if you need off-road prowess, towing capability, or 7 seats. Otherwise though, it's certainly a usefully improved product. Adding a plug-in hybrid version was an obvious move. The infotainment upgrade was much needed. It now feels even more special inside, and the safety standards are now even stronger. Less telling, we think, have been the handling changes Lexus claim to have made. This car remains an SUV for the Riviera rather than the racetrack. For most potential buyers, though, that's as it should be. As one writer observed, the RX replaces dynamism with the calming aura of whale music and scented candles. There's something in that. But for all that, in 5th generation form, this is undeniably a different kind of Lexus RX. Just different enough to give the brand a chance of conquest sales in the segment, but not so different that it will alienate this model line's loyal bank of mainly American customers. Whether it's now interesting enough to tempt Teutonic brand buyers, it'll be fascinating to find out. They should certainly give this Japanese contender a chance. Forget what the magazines tell you. Those seriously in search of a large, plush SUV typically prioritise luxury, style and tax-friendly efficiency above almost everything else. These elements being things that this Lexus now nails more effectively than ever before. According to the brand, it's all about sharpened sophistication and seductive strength. We prefer simply to call this a more sensible way to own what remains a very indulgent kind of car.